look, it's almost like two separate things. Okay, so it's like what needs to be done, you know, versus how you get it done.
Right.
And that's the how you get it done part is much more challenging. But it's like I'd say like you know, like if you were bit by a venomous snake, and like whatever the like antidote or something is like at the top of a really steep hill, and you're like, okay, well the answer is we have to get that and inject it in you. But then the real problem becomes like, okay, but how the hell do we get up this hill? Right. So like the answer is that all these agencies need to be abolished. The answer is that like you need a drastic reduction in the size and scope of government. You need to like abolish all of these three-letter organizations and just start over. Start over with the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. That would be about as close to perfect as you could get. However, what you're dealing with is the most powerful entrenched interests in the history of the world. The American federal government is the biggest gravy train in the history of the world, the biggest organization in the history of the world by every metric. How do you roll that back? That's a much more difficult question. And I think that my guess on this is that like the only plausible way to do this is that you need like a mass populist movement. You need and it can't be like we got 45% of the country who's fed up with this government. It's got to be like we got 85% of the country and we're all together on all of this. And then you need elites. Like you need the elites who will actually like put their power and influence and wealth behind this kind of, you know, type of movement to try to look. I mean, what really has to happen is that, and I think to some degree this is what happened with Elon Musk taking over Twitter. You know, is that type of thing where you have a real elite, like a natural elite too, somebody who wasn't just like picked, didn't just win an election, but like built something insane. You know, I think at least it seems to me. I don't know Elon Musk at all, but it seems to me like he had a real belief that he's like we're going to destroy this country. Like if we don't have kind of some type of free speech platform, we're going to this is going to be our demise. And I think you need enough powerful people to realize that like you want to keep this thing together, man, because you're doing great. Like this isn't good for you if this whole country falls apart. And we're getting dangerously close to that point. And look, man, when it comes down to it, it's like the reason why America is the most successful country that's ever existed is because it was the freest country. And that's the beautiful thing. Like freedom is not only the most like moral system, but it's also like leads to the most prosperity. It leads to the most harmony. Like it's what civilized behavior is, right? Like the essence of civilized behavior is essentially the non-aggression principle. The idea that like you respect people and their property, and you don't, you know what I mean? Like you're not allowed to just be a violent animal. You have to be non-violent and try to persuade people and trade with them. That's how civilization is built. And America was the best at that. You know, we were the best at that, at restraining government, having free markets, I mean, individual liberty. And we need to move back toward that or we're going to die.
But the problem with that is that you're trying to move back towards that against people that have this desire for self-preservation, and they have their own jobs and they have their position of power that they don't want to relinquish. Because what would they do now? What do they do now? You take everyone that's in all these intelligence agencies, like you're no longer needed. But what about the people that are needed? And what about the tasks that they do that are important? What about the legitimate eyes on terrorism? Mm-hmm. What about the legitimate, intelligence they're gathering about real dangers to the United States? What do you do about that?
Well, for the first part of it, I don't have all the answers to this, but I know that like when the Soviet Union fell, there were people, I think to this day, but there were like people like communist like government officials who are like still collecting pensions. Like they just kind of like paid them off, almost like, listen, your services here are no longer needed, but that's like, don't revolt or anything. We're not going to kill you. We're not putting you on trial, but like you're done. Take this money and go. I would be open to something like that. For some people, I do think others should be criminally prosecuted. But I think that there certainly is like a role for like intelligence gathering. There certainly has to be a role for national defense. Now, I think in an ideal world, it would all be kind of like a voluntary private type system. But in practical terms, I think that, look, like it's not as if before the CIA was created, that was just like the president was just like, we have no intelligence. We're just flying completely blind, you know?
Right.
And like what it was created to be was essentially like a newspaper for the president. Like you're supposed to basically deliver, here's the news the president needs to know, like the real important news. And what it's become is like a paramilitary organization that starts wars and colored revolutions all around the world, lies the American people into conflict, spies on our political leaders and presidential campaigns and all of this stuff. And you're like, yeah, this just became something it wasn't ever supposed to be. It was never supposed to be this thing. Now you're really the guys who are in control. And I think since Kennedy, that's kind of been true. That like that's really who's running the show here. And you can't go on with that. You know what I mean? Like that has to just be scrapped. Now, you know, by the way, if anyone from the CIA is listening, I'm no threat to ever actually do this. So we're totally cool. Totally cool.
I bet there's certain people in the CIA that agree with you.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there are.
There's people that are very uncomfortable with the way things go. People that are real patriots that got into that job because they genuinely want to protect American interests and American people.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
There are always lots of people like that, almost in any organization, you know?
But
like,
it is absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just this principle that's always existed.
Well, this is the essence of why, you know, Washington, D.C. being so powerful is such a problem. It's like when you have this like kind of concentrated power in D.C., it's power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's the old Lord Atkins saying, which really does apply. And this is essentially why I'm a libertarian and not a leftist, is that it's because I don't even on some pure levels, I think I have some of the same kind of, like I was a left-leaning kid before I got obsessed with Ron Paul and all this stuff. But like I care about helping poor people, and I don't think you should be a bigot, and you know what I mean? Like I have like those kind of leftist impulses, but it's just like I feel like most of like progressives and leftists, they want to have a very powerful government that does those things. And my realization is that you can never have this very powerful government without all the corruption that comes along with it. Like you kind of essentially want power to not corrupt, but it's going to. It's just inevitable.